At least we know the Deans bought their pencils tonight. And they've got plenty of them, so that's good. There'll be lots of colours. Well, welcome everyone to our B for this evening. Looks like being quite an enjoyable evening. Brother Phil's got some very nice books up here and plenty of work for us to do, so that's good. So I hope you all brought your pens and pencils and rulers, and we'll get to that shortly. So this is part one of 2 parts, but it'll take 3 weeks because we have our special weekend next weekend. But to commence our evening this evening, we'll start by singing together hymn 318 and then with a word of prayer. Our great and almighty Father, thou the God of Abraham, of Isaac and of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, from whom the children of Israel have descended. Those children travelled to the promised land, a land of milk and honey, a land which has thy care, and over which thine eyes are continually watching. But thy people turned from thy commandments. They did not walk in them, nor cleave unto thee. And may thy blessing be with us as we look over thy land this evening, as we follow its hills and valleys. May the events of Scripture come to life as we see those places where those of old lived and walked and served. And may we each be mindful of the failings of the past and take heed lest we become high-minded and think that we are somewhat better than those that failed. So watch over us now as we give our thanks for the time we have around thy word, and we leave this evening in thy care, asking this blessing in Jesus Christ. Amen. So Brother Phil has asked that we read from Deuteronomy chapter 11, from verses 8 to 17, I'll ask Brother Josh Johns to come and read that for us.
Reading together Deuteronomy chapter 11, starting at verse 8 and going through to verse 17. Verse 8. Therefore shall we keep all the commandments which I commanded you this day, that ye may be strong and go in and possess the land whither ye go to possess it, and that ye may prolong your days in the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers to give you unto them and to their seed, and the land that floweth with milk and honey. For the land whither thou goest in to possess it is not the land as the land of Egypt, from whence ye came out, where thou sowest thy seed and waterest with thy foot, as a garden of herbs. But the land whither ye go to possess it is a land of hills and valleys, and drinketh water of the rain of heaven, a land which the Lord thy God careth for. The eyes of the Lord thy God are always upon it, from the beginning of the year even unto the end of the year. And it shall come to pass, if ye shall hearken diligently unto my commandments, which I command you this day, to love the Lord your God, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, that I'll give you the rain of your land that is due in due season, the first rain and the latter rain, that thou mayest gather in your corn and thy wine and thine oil. And I will send grasses in thy fields for thy cattle, that thou mayest eat and be full. Take heed to yourselves, that your hearts be not deceived, and ye turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. And then the Lord's wrath will be kindled against you, and he'll shut up the heaven, that there be no rain, and that the land yield not her fruit, unless ye perish quickly from off the good land which the Lord giveth you.
All right, I'll hand over to Brother Phil and he can lead us in the geography of the Holy Land.
I thought you were going to say control the masses. Now, Laurie, I reckon, do you mind if you bunch on with the Scots? Is that all right? And then the Olivers, you can come down the front here and have a table if you want, if that works. I think most other families have got a table by the looks of it, so that's good. And what I have got here is a bit of a cheat sheet for parents. So just in case things get a bit out of whack and someone needs to ask someone for the answer, at least the parents are armed. So the aim of tonight is really a bit of an information night. Did I give you one, James? A bit of an information night on the geography of the Holy Land, with the intent of being able to have enough information to go into your Bibles, either into a wide margin Bible or on an insert. And I've got some insert paper up here for anyone that might want to go that way. And the thing that inspired the studies that we're doing tonight, last year Uncle Aaron Johns was having a chat to me about what we could do for our next Bible marking sort of series as an ecclesia. And I said, well, the thing that most inspired me as a young person in Bible readings was when Uncle John Martin at the School of the Prophets did a series of 7 talks on the geography of the Holy Land. And I remember booking in thinking, oh, it'd be interesting. But when we actually got into it, it was amazing. It really changed the way that you pictured your Bible readings, because you started to feel that you knew the land, you understood where characters lived, where the different events were happening. And not only that, he put the carrot in front of us that the next year we would have School of the Prophets in Israel. Well, that never happened. But nevertheless, it was a good incentive to get us interested in looking at the land. Now, a little bit conscious that we've got 2 audiences here. So for those that are online, there should be a link in the description there that will give you the handout that we've just done. So if you wanted to download that, you can. It's a Dropbox link. And there's also 3 short video links there as well. I found this little resource when I was online looking at things. It was called the Satellite Bible Atlas group, which are a group that went to Israel and have put together a really neat little, I don't know, it's about a 16 series, little chomp-sized 20-minute periods on different parts of the Holy Land. And I've put 3 links on there, so if you are interested to go and do that with your kids, the first 3 are there, and then you can follow the rest as you deem fit, because we definitely won't get through everything in this series. But yeah, really neat little ones that focus on the different areas and geographically, and bring them to life with movies and things, which obviously, given copyright, I can't just grab off of the web and show you tonight. So it's another way that you can follow on from our thoughts tonight. So Israel, well, there it is on the screen. Does that work? I think that's working. Beautiful. So there it is. It's just this small little country that just happens to be situated in almost the middle of every single map of the world, isn't it? It's unique how things happen, and obviously that's something that for us we think, well, that's a central purpose for us to look at as far as God's purpose goes. But it's really interesting to think about the big picture of why Israel is special to us, and it's nothing to do with the fact that Israel was a uniquely smart people or nation, that God chose them. And he reminds them in Deuteronomy 7 verse 6, this is Moses' words, last words to the people of Israel, that God did not set his love upon you nor choose you because you were more in number than any people. You were the fewest of all people, but he chose you because he loved you and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn unto your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so God was faithful to his promise to those patriarchs. And that promise to them was that they would be given a land, them and their seed, which they would inherit forever. And so for Abraham, when he left Ur of the Chaldees, he had a destination that he was going to. And he was excited about it. He'd been promised God this land, and it would be a land that would be inherited by those that would come out of from his family forever. And that's us, of course, isn't it? The seed of Abraham. And so for us, it's a connection which we have with the physical land of Israel today, which we should be excited about, because it is the inheritance which God has promised to the faithful. That small little land right in the centre of so many world maps is promised to those who are the seed of Abraham. And so Abraham was encouraged to arise, walk through the land and the length of it and the breadth of it, for I will give it unto you. You touch the sand, let it go through your fingers. Get up into the mountains and look out over the plains. Because this is the land which you've been promised. And so it's a good thing for us as an inheritance, as a real core understanding of our faith, that that's where the purpose of God is. That we walk through the land. And this was one of the, I don't know, how many kids here ever heard an Uncle John Martin talk? Not too many. It's amazing. I grew up and everyone spoke about Uncle Percy Mansfield, how amazing he was that he changed his generation, and yet I'd never heard him. And now our generation is saying the same thing about Uncle John Martin, a man that just brought the Bible to life because he could see it in his mind. And all of us that are of my age would agree with that comment. And this was one of his little animations. William's like, oh, I love this one, Dad. Can you play it again? And I was sitting there remembering Uncle John when he first got into PowerPoint, and everything became little animations. So this was a little touch of Uncle John. So This is, I've actually got Uncle John's slides from this series and taken them, brought them and mixed them a bit with some of my own thoughts. Every now and then there'll be something which the boys that grew up in Enfield and sisters, Lorraine, might see and think, oh yeah, that's something I've seen before. So not only has God chosen a people, but through the book of Deuteronomy, there's this little phrase, and it occurs quite often, that God chose a place for them to worship. A place to worship because he wanted this place to be associated with his name. And of course, that place was Jerusalem, isn't it? The pointer to peace. And it's nestled there in the heart of a land which is, as we got there in some distances, it's about 330 kilometres from north to south. And then, if you see, there's a bit of a squeeze as it goes up the coast. So down when you're near the Dead Sea, it's about 88 kilometres, 90 kilometres or so. Up towards the Sea of Galilee, 48 kilometres. It's a small land, and we'll look at that relatively to Australia in just a tick. But it's a place that God has chosen to be the centre of the earth. For that place to be known that his name is to be worshipped and to understand his name. It's the place where the teaching about his name goes forward. And Zechariah 14 verse 16 says about all nations in the age to come, going up to that place year by year to worship the King. So it's a special place. And that's why we're doing this series, to make it feel special to our kids and to remind ourselves of just how special that place is. It's in God's heart, and we'll find a little bit more about that in a few quotes that we look at in introduction. So anyone know what that country is? Wales? Ah, and anything special about Australia? Anyone else? No? Rosa? It's where we live, absolutely. That's a good start, isn't it? So Australia, we're pretty common with Australia. We're pretty understanding of South Australia, I guess. So what I've done is I've just put a little relative size of the whole land of Israel on top of where we live today. So who's been to Victor Harbour? Monique, Henry, you should know Victor Harbour pretty good. You spend half your life down there, don't you? It's a nice place. Victor Harbour, okay, so we all know where Victor Harbour is there, down on this little section down here, so on that point. Has anyone been to Kangaroo Island? Oh, about half the people, so that's not bad. So you know, if you go to Victor Harbour, you sort of have to drive a little bit around the coast, don't you, because you can't quite see Kangaroo Island from Victor Harbour. So the little bottom section there we've got going across to Kingscote, so that's about 100 kilometres or so, 90 kilometres or so from Victor Harbour to Kingscote. So that's about the distance we've got going from the Dead Sea to the plains of Israel and the Mediterranean Sea. So if we're travelling north then, how long is it from north to south? So we're right down the bottom of the land of Israel. Now we want to travel all the way up to the north. Who's been to Membray Creek recently? Flinders Ranges. Riding bikes. Quorn. Who's been to Quorn? See Uncle Matt up the back there. What's at Quorn? Yeah. Steam train, absolutely. Everyone loves steam trains. Quorn, good spot to go. And that steam train actually has like about a 4-hour journey, I reckon, 2-hour journey, I reckon. If you jump on it, it goes to Port Augusta. Is that right? It is, isn't it? More than 2. Nevertheless, that steam train goes from Quorn to Port Augusta, so 3 hours maybe. Distance-wise, it's not a real long distance. It's about 30 kilometres. It's windy, I guess, which is probably why it takes the time. But that's sort of the north end of Israel. And then we come back down the York Peninsula there. York Peninsula, I think, right? That's right. Join it back up with Kingscote. So that's sort of the size. Now, I went for a bike ride yesterday, and I just wanted to spend a bit of moment just to meditate. And I thought, well, I'll go down the beach. I'll sit on one of those chairs where I've got a buddy that's made out of iron next to me so I don't feel lonely. And I looked out across the coast, and I could see in the distance the outshape of York Peninsula. You ever done it? Anyone ever seen that down the beach? So in your mind, that's what you're sort of thinking. So you're sitting up on the top of the Judean hills near Jerusalem. And if you look out towards the coast, that's pretty much about the distance that you're looking across. As if you're looking across the York Peninsula, you'd be seeing the coastline of Israel. So visually in your head, I guess, you get a little bit of a distance feel looking from the east to the west. Well, we just read a little passage out of Deuteronomy chapter 11, just pointing you there to verse 12. And just a little bit of a note you might want to put in your margins. This land which God was going to give the children of Israel, a land which Yahweh, thou God, careth for, it literally means to tread or to frequent. So it's like Auntie Rosie with her garden, okay? She goes out there and she walks it with the hose and she cares for it. And that's the sense, I guess, that the Hebrew word, God caring for this land of Israel has. It's a land which his eyes are always upon. He cares for it because he's got a future for it, a future purpose. And when Israel came out of Egypt, God chose this land as the place that they would go to build the nation that would worship and bring honour to his name. And if we just read there from verse 10, you can see I've highlighted a couple of words in red. They had been in the land of Egypt. They'd been slaves in the land of Egypt. But Egypt, unlike Israel, was going to be vastly different. Or should I say, Israel, unlike Egypt, was going to be vastly different. Now what I've done there is I've just zoomed in on where Egypt was. And this little spot here that's super green, do you know why it's super green? Ollie? They care for it a lot? Yeah, what do they care for it with? Anyone know? Juliet? Water. All right, that's right. It's called, does anyone know what it's called for extra bonus points? Jake? Delta. The Nile Delta. Okay, all right. So the River Nile, which is this other green patch you see here running up through here, the continent of Africa, comes to this point where it starts splitting out into low-lying plains, and the water just literally pulls out across those plains. And of course, with water comes growth. And what you'd notice there is this great green patch from the satellite. When you come over towards Israel, which is right where my red dot is on the screen there now, and I've blown up, you'll notice that there's not quite so much green, is there? It is green, but it's not quite so much green. When you look around the area of where Israel is, what is there? To the south and to the east. Paddy? Dirt. Hot dirt. Sand. Desert. That's right. So it's a country which is surrounded by desert, isn't it? Nevertheless, on the western side of it is the sea, and that makes a huge difference. But what it means is that it's a country which is affected by seasons. We'll have a look at that on the next slide after this one. So Garden of Herbs, let's think about a Garden of Herbs. All right, well, that was what they found in the land of Egypt. In fact, someone wanted to make a Garden of Herbs in the Bible. Do you know who it was? They decided they're going to knock someone off so they could put a Garden of Herbs. Jake's already answered one, so let's, yep. Ahab, okay, so who was he going, what did he want to do? What was the story? Right, okay. So a vineyard takes a lot of time to establish, doesn't it? It's about 7 years to get a vineyard up and going properly. Hard work, a lot of faith, planting, time, tendering. A Garden of Herbs, well, they're here in one season, and as long as you keep the water up to them, put the seed in, you'll be able to grow up for the next season. It was actually a sign of opulence, this Garden of Herbs, I guess, and yet Naboth's vineyard was about hard work and a family inheritance. What you got here is a picture on the right. It's one from Uncle John, where the little blue arrow is pointing. There's a man down there, and he's got a donkey, I believe, and it's some sort of contraption which was tipping water up into these trenches. And what we've got on the left-hand side here is a sign of a trench. And basically, what they can do through the Nile and all the tributaries that's come out in the Nile Delta, they plant their crop, and then they have something basically just to get the water out of that channel, and it tips it into this smaller channel which they've dug, and it just flows out and it irrigates basically the Nile Delta, and so they can have a lot of food growing there very easily. In fact, it's said there in that last verse that we were looking at, just in between the red bits, the land of Israel from whence ye come, where thou sowest thy seed and waterest it with thy foot. And literally that's what they would do, like a small little channel built up, a little mound, and what they would do is they would just block off that channel with their foot so the water couldn't go that way, and they would open the next channel and they would just guide it off to the other part that needed to be watered. So quite an easy job, really, isn't it, as far as getting water for your crops to grow. But that's not what God had in store for the nation of Israel. Now, what he says is you're going to inherit this land. You're going to inherit, verse 11, a land of hills and valleys, which drinketh water of the rain of heaven. Now, how's that different to a river that's always running through your land? What do you reckon, Ollie? Yeah? Not of honey? No. So how's it different? You've got a river that's permanently running, the River Nile, and yet God said, you're not going to have a land like that. You're going to have a land that drinks water from the rain of heaven. April?
You have to rely on God.
You have to rely on the rain, don't you? In fact, I was up at Murray Bridge and just doing an exhort up there recently on the farmer. And I had a quick chat to the Thomases afterwards. And I said, a farmer's life is a life of faith. I mean, when they sow seed, and Matt grins down here because he's lived through it with his dad, they sow seed not knowing really whether that's going to bring an income to their family or not. They sow at a time that's the right time of the year, but they have to have faith that the rain will come. And just rain enough and to get it to go, not too much, and when it sprouts, then it eventually gets going, and then they need a bit more rain, and they need the warmth, and they need the cool, and they need all that weather factor working together to have a good crop. And that's the land which God gave the land of Israel, gave the nation of Israel, a land which they would have to have faith in God. And so, from the western side, from the Mediterranean, they would have the rains which would come in and would give the water that would be needed to make rivers run and to help crops to grow. But conversely, like Paddy said, on the east side was desert. So if God said it's time for an east wind to come, guess what happened to their crops? What happens in your garden, Rosa, when Dad doesn't water it and the hot weather comes? They fall over, don't they? Happens quite often, doesn't it? So, when actually, in saying that, there's quite a similarity between our weather patterns here in South Australia and the land of Israel. So we would often complain about a hot northerly coming through, wouldn't we? That it comes from the desert parts of South Australia, and it gets hot. But likewise, we enjoy the refreshing, cool winds off of the ocean. And we enjoy them on a summer's night, don't you, when they come through and Nathan Wren up in the greeny suburbs open their windows and they don't even need an air conditioner. So it sort of has a similar sort of feel to it, the land of Israel, to what we have here today. Now, when I was younger, I was inspired to put together a Bible insert that showed a few snapshot photos of the land of Israel. We're not going to go around these at the moment. We will as we go through our talks. But there you can get a bit of a snapshot feel, I guess, of the different climates and environments that are found through the nation of Israel. You've got nice green rolling hills, green valleys. You've got a lake, Sea of Galilee. You've got some steeper mountains, which of course cause rain to come. As the cold air's currents hit them, that's when the rain will drop, won't it? At the same time, down the south, you've got some really dry desert. And so all of that shows that this land which God cares for has got a variety within it, hasn't it? Which he could use at different times to teach the nation of Israel the lessons for the way of life that he wanted from them. Now, what we're going to aim to put together tonight is just facts, as I'm saying, but here's a picture from Uncle Jamie's Bible. I've got a similar one here in Deuteronomy 11. When we were growing up with Uncle John, he got us to do that, and it's been invaluable to have something that I can always turn back to. So it's not Bible marking as far as underlining words and meanings, but what it is invaluable to get a visual picture and feel of what the land of Israel is like. And always having that page, you can turn back to in your Bible and you can work out where that person came from and what sort of a geographical position he came in. So this morning I think there was a verse in Micah that said something about the rain returning to Carmel and to Bashan and to Mount Ephraim and to Gilead. Was that right, Dad? All in one verse. And then we turn to Jeremiah and it said exactly the same thing, didn't it, in Jeremiah 50. And you think, well, hang on, there's 4 names. What do they mean to me? Nothing, unless I know where Mount Carmel is. Where's Mount Carmel? Where's Bashan? Where's Mount Ephraim? Where's Gilead? And they're on the western and the eastern side of the River Jordan, quite different positions, but that knowledge suddenly opens up a verse and you think, oh, that's interesting. What does that actually mean? So what I've got there and we've handed out and we're going to work through are things, these little images. We're going to get the facts on them and start building up a bit of a understanding. They're scaled to about the size of an Oxford White Margin Bible, hopefully. I measured them up. So they should be able to fit into an Oxford Wide Margin Bible. And there's sort of my suggestion how I reckon it could be laid out if we were to put it around Deuteronomy chapter 11. So that we can have a look at that a little bit later, but it should fit into our Oxford Wide Margin Bible. What I also have down here for afterwards is some Bible insert paper. So I've got a guillotine. We can trim it up, make sure it's the right size for your Bible. And then anyone that follows it through, I'll definitely I'll raid Auntie Rosie's piggy bank and we'll make sure we get a chocolate bar for you. So this is something that I reckon is really important for you to put some time into and try and get into your Bible. If it's an insert, obviously it can go from the Bible you've got now to whatever Bible you might get in the future. All right, well, let's begin the walk through the land. What have we got? We've got different districts of the land. So this I'm not really going to have a lot of photos. I know there's some people here that have been to Israel. So Jimmy, I'll probably have to tap up some photos from you. I know Mum and Dad have. There's some people out in the back hall that have. Who's been to Israel here? Phil has. Matt, Dan. Look at that. There should be some tour guides coming up here in the next talks, eh? What do you reckon? Laurie, you haven't been to Israel unless it was a dream. It was. Okay, so let's have a look at the districts of the land. So I'm sort of looking at this map down in the bottom corner that you've got there. It's just the very standard looking map. So the districts of the land, well, out to the north we've got Lebanon. And Lebanon is obviously something we, as an ecclesia, we have a connection with. But it's the tail end of... Has everyone got a handout, by the way? Is there anyone that needs one? Got a stash of extras here for... So Mount Hermon is particularly the point of Lebanon that we're interested in. It's the tail end of what's called the anti-Lebanese ranges. Comes right down and it's the end of that range, which is actually the peak of Mount Hermon. And that becomes the head of the land. And we'll see that in a few slides later, just how prominent that is to the land of Israel. So we're going to work our way from north to south, just going down on this the left side or the west side of the River Jordan. Galilee. Who knows anything about Galilee? Ollie? It is. It's the majority. It's where Jesus spent the majority of his time, wasn't it? So Nazareth. Nazareth was in Galilee. It was called Galilee of the... Anyone? Gentiles? Loren said it without saying it. Yep. Because it was further north in the land of Israel, so it was where Gentiles tended to come in. Around Jerusalem itself would be very Jew-centric. And we know that as we go through looking in the New Testament and the record of Jesus. So Galilee there, it too had a very prominent feature in it, the Lake of Galilee or the Sea of Galilee, which had a few different names, which we won't look at the moment. We go from Galilee, going down south again, we come to Samaria. What do we know about Samaria? Anyone? How many tribes? How many tribes were in Samaria? The 2 tribes or the 10 tribes? All our Sunday school kids should be coming out with it because it was in the exams. So Samaria was the 10 tribes, wasn't it, of the north? As we come down towards where the Dead Sea is, we then come into the area of Judea. And of course, Judea is where the two tribes were. Sorry, Matt, disagreeing with something already. Judea. So Judea, of course, has got Jerusalem in it, and the heart of where David and Solomon and Israel, as we know it today, has its seat of government. And finally, right down in the south, we've got something that's called the Negev. Bit of a funny word, isn't it? It means dry, arid. And literally, once you get down to the bottom of Israel, we go into the desert. It's Sinai and the wilderness and the 40 years of wandering. That's where we are. So we're down into that part of the land. Now, if we come on to the eastern side of the River Jordan now, up the north there, we've got Bashan. In the New Testament, it's called Decapolis. So the 10 cities that were set up by the Romans. A little bit further down, we've got the area of Gilead. Anyone know anyone famous that came from Gilead? He could run in front of a chariot. He was that fast. Yeah? Wills? Elijah. That's right, smack on. He was a Gileadite, wasn't he? And then we come down even further to where the Dead Sea is. We've got the plateau of Moab. Anyone know a famous person from Moab? Got a whole book after her? Ruth, well done. Okay. So there we've got the districts of the land of Israel. They do change names a little bit, as we've indicated in New Testament and Old Testament. I've sort of brought them all together. So hopefully that those names lock in reasonably commonly as part of your Bible understandings. Everyone got them? So they're districts, I guess. We're talking about areas of people and type of people that we associate with different names. So up the north, we've got Lebanon, which is Mount Hermon, but we definitely know Galilee, Samaria, and Judea, very commonly described and used areas in our Bible understanding. Bashan, maybe not quite so much, but Gilead and Moab, definitely. You know, the only thing I could think about Bashan straight off my bat was the great bulls of Bashan. Josh nods his head as well. So I'm assuming, I haven't read into it, that was the cattle sort of area known for big bulls, I guess.
That's why Reuben and them wanted that site, because of the cattle, because they had much cattle.
Right.
That's why they wanted to be stationed down that eastern side.
Interesting, okay. Yeah, so Uncle Jamie was just saying, so that's why Manasseh and Reuben, wasn't it, that wanted the eastern side of the River Jordan for their cattle. All right, so that was the districts. Hopefully everyone's got them. The types of land. So types is a bit different to people. We're talking about the actual topography of the land, I guess, when we go through this. Going from west to east. Now, Uncle John had a test for us at the end of School of the Prophets to make sure we remembered all these. I don't know if Uncle Phil's quite that hardcore, but it would be a good thing to remember if you could. So right on the coast, actually, trick question, I haven't got up there. Do you know what the name of that sea is? Anyone? On the left? It's a pretty big word. Auntie Louise is going to spell it afterwards. Yep, Malia? The Mediterranean. And Auntie Louise? Oh, sorry. Yeah, that one starts with an M. The Mediterranean Sea, okay. So that's out there, the vast expanse of blue. And then, of course, on the coastline, we've got this maritime plain. We've got a few photos of this coming up, actually. So we'll just make sure we write these down, and then we'll have a look at a few photos. There's an area in between that and the Dead Sea. Don't go too close towards the Dead Sea, because there's another area to come in yet called the Shephelah. And the Shephelah means the low hills, or the rolling hills. Again, it's very similar to where we live in Adelaide. So we know we've got the foothills. They're the ones that I ride up on my bike. And then we've got the steeper hills, and they're the ones that Uncle Phil Luke rides up on his bike. So we're sort of talking the Torrens Park. We're talking down near the bottom of the freeway, that sort of area. You sort of got that gentle incline that goes up. In fact, the Shephelah varies between 150 metres above sea level and 200. So Mount Lofty is 730 or thereabouts. There you go, Blackwood. So we're talking about Blackwood sort of heights. So that, it varies about that, and it varies about that for probably 13 kilometres or something like that. So it's a reasonable length. It's not massive, but it just sort of varies between that sort of height. And then we get into some more steeper hills called the Judean Hills. The Judean Hills, of course, feature Jerusalem, Hebron, those sort of towns, Bethlehem. They're much more limestoney and hard, whereas the Shephelah is a lot softer sort of soil, more fertile, and able to grow a lot more crops. Whereas in the hills, you'd be having your sheep, you'd be having your flocks of whatever. That's Matt, help me. Goats. That's right, your goats, of course. In fact, there was always a story from Uncle John when you got to the Dead Sea and he was looking up at these limestone cliffs and there was a goat standing up the top of this cliff. And he's like, he's never going to come down. And over he goes, the edge, and he spins and he twists and he goes. Anyone else heard that story? The goats? Yep, Shem's heard it. Good. So the goats that lived around the area of the Dead Sea and the limestone cliffs. The Jordan Valley is a massive feature, very deep. And we're going to look at that in a little bit. In fact, it gets down to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is the deepest body of water in the world as far as how deep it is below sea level. Now to the north, where we've got these hills going up towards the north, and they stop at a point that's got the Sumerian ranges going through it, which peak at Mount Carmel, but it creates another variation called the Jezreel Valley. So that little knobble that's poking out there on the end, right where my little red spot is where Mount Carmel is. And then there's a mountain range that comes down through here and joins up to the Judean Hills. Okay, so it sort of separates all this area underneath where I've got the Maritime Plain and the Shephelah, and creates a bit of a natural barrier. And then as we go north, we've got this Jezreel Valley. And then to the far east, we've got two areas there, Moab and Gilead. So we come out of the Jordan Valley and we come onto the plateaus of Moab and Gilead, which then go out into the Arabian desert. So let's have a quick look at a few photos of this area. We'll go back through those names, so hopefully you'll be able to pick them up. The Maritime Plain. So we've got a little section here which is only a few kilometres, 6 kilometres or so, that goes right down the coast, nice and flat, sort of pretty much sea level, sandy. Not a lot of stuff that you grow there, but obviously it's a spot for Matt's holiday village, holidays and that sort of thing, where you can enjoy the sea breezes. Here's a picture of the Shephelah. So again, you can see it's low-lying fields. We're looking back up towards the Judean Hills. So what I've got over here is a little red arrow that's sort of pointing in the way that we're looking. And we're looking across those low-lying fields, nice and green, and of course fertile places where crops can be grown quite easily. We come a bit closer now to the Judean Hills, and the Judean Hills have two different areas, I guess, with slightly different characteristics. We've got the area around Jerusalem, which is sort of called the Jerusalem Hills, and then we've got the area that goes from Hebron down towards the Dead Sea. So we've got two little pictures that give you that feel. So quite green. We're going up into more mountain, sort of 900 metres above sea level, with some pretty definite valleys in them, okay? So as we're going towards Jerusalem, we're coming into an area that's got valleys. Some key valleys would be the Sorek Valley, the one where David fought Goliath, Elah, yep, that's right, Valley of Elah. Sorek was famous by Samson, and I think the other one was called Ajalon, I think it is. Someone's nodding their head over there. Further north. But we're talking about in this sort of area here is one type of the Judean Hills. As we come down a little bit more towards the south, it starts to get a bit more harsher, a bit more drier, and a lot more limestoney. And here, just in the background there, you can see a body of water, which is the Dead Sea, and you've got some pretty serious sort of pinnacle-y mountains, and they drop down into where the Dead Sea is. So we've got different types of land as we get into that area. The Jordan Valley. Well, we know the River Jordan follows right down the middle of the land, doesn't it? It's the most interesting thing to draw when you're drawing the land of Israel, because it's about the only thing that you can draw that connects the two bodies of water. It starts about sea level, so the entrance into this little spot of water up here, which is called, does anyone know what that is? Lake Hula, that's right. I know. It doesn't really exist now because they sort of repurpose the water, don't they, and use it. Got rid of the mosquitoes. Right, okay. So there's a little body of water, and it's about sea level. As you get to Sea of Galilee, it gets a little bit lower, and when you get down to the Dead Sea, you're 350 odd metres below sea level. So there's this big drop. And of course, as you're going through that drop, what do you expect happens with this valley? It starts to get deeper and deeper and deeper, doesn't it? True, Jimmy?
Yeah, the bus driver says, everyone put your snorkel on. We are going under the water.
Is that right? As you go down into the Jordan Valley. There's a really cool, those links which I spoke about, there's a really good one on the River Jordan, and particularly walking up from Jericho towards Jerusalem. There's walking on the old path, so quite an interesting one to have a look at. Nevertheless, the River Jordan, essential as far as water for people that were living, used by John the Baptist, of course, for baptising, but always descending and descending down to what is appropriately called the Dead Sea. And so the nation of Israel was built around this lesson that began at Mount Hermon with beautiful snow on top of it, and then the pure waters that came through Hula and ended up in the Dead Sea, which is the deepest, the saltiest, and nothing lives there. Death, is it? So there's this descending river, and a principle with it, isn't there? If we're not looking for God in life, then we start with that opportunity, but we end up in the Dead Sea without life at all. The Jezreel Valley, a real breadbasket, I guess, as far as the land goes. Quite an open area. This is where the Battle of Sisera happened, and it's got the River Kishon comes back up comes off of the Mount Carmel and the hill ranges there, and of course that came down and flooded the pass that comes into the Jezreel Valley, and Sisera was defeated. Sisera? That's right, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, but nevertheless, where this valley is, so this valley here, just let me put the red spot where it is, about there. We got one pointer pointing back up this way. That one there is here. The reason I can say that is because there's this beautiful bald head. I remember Uncle John saying, just like my head, that one. A nice round dome. We've got Steiners here, so we'll just look at him for a moment. And that's how we can picture Mount Tabor. Sits right in the middle of your eye line as you're looking back towards the Sea of Galilee, up the Valley of Jezreel. If you were to look, though, north across the Valley of Jezreel, here is what we've got. We've got these hill over here, which is where Nazareth would be, and Galilee. Over right on the right here, and you probably can't see it in this picture, oh, you just can, is the Sea of Galilee. Again, there's a pass that goes through there, and if we ever did the Jezreel Valley, it's quite an interesting and little story to pick up. Moab and Gilead, on the other hand, so we're looking here now onto the east side of the Jordan Valley. You've got this steep escarpment that goes up, and then you've got a plateau where it goes flat. And I think we did some talks on Ruth at some stage, looking back across from where Bethlehem was, about here, looking across the waters towards Moab, and you can quite easily see the other side of the Dead Sea. That's a visual thing. But definitely comes up and hits the plateau, and on the plateau is where the crops and that would be grown as far as Moab goes. Beneath it is these quite sharp rising cliffs. I think distance-wise we've pretty much had a look at that one. Let me come now into our next little picture. So how'd you go following all that through? Not too bad? All right, we might do one more, and then we've got another session, not next week, but the week after, where we'll pick up some of the other details. So here we're going to just talk about the descent of the River Jordan, the descender. So like I said, up here, we're talking Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is 2,814 metres above sea level. So I said Mount Lofty was, what did I say it was? 730, about that sort of thing. So if we're going to do 2814, apparently Jeb is the maths whiz, I heard that on Thursday. How many times Mount Lofty? To get to the height of Mount Hermon, how many times up and down Mount Lofty? Well, just up and up and up. Only Louise does Mount Lofty all the time. But if you times it by 4, that's about the height you're getting from Mount Hermon. So anyone walked up Mount Lofty? Wow, look at that, heaps of people. So keep going 4 times and you've gone up Mount Hermon. So that becomes the head of the land of Israel. It's snow-capped, and when that snow melts, it can come down and it's channeled down into the Jordan Valley. Comes down here, and as I said, we get to this little point here, which is called Hula. I've got the writing there on the right. Hopefully it's big enough for everyone to read. So on the right there, the entrance into Lake Hula is about 2.1 metres above sea level, and the water is drinkable, straight into the mouth. Beautiful and snow water of quality. It then goes about 18 kilometres, in which time it drops another almost 200 metres to the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is actually under sea level by 192 metres. So it's quite a steep drop, isn't it? And you're going down below the sea level into it. So everything else that is around it is obviously quite high, and you're coming down into it at that point. Now remember, this is the area of the Valley of Jezreel. We've got Capernaum, we've got a few little mountains that surround the Sea of Galilee, but most of this here is a valley, reasonably much at sea level. So when we come down here, of course we've got the Judean hills, and we've got Gilead on either side. So we're talking about mountains which are going up 900 metres above sea level, down to a river which is from 200 down to 400 below sea level. So it's on top of it, isn't it? It's superimposing, I think is the word. So you're going from 900 plus the 400, and you're starting to get the feel of looking up towards the top of those mountains from the Jordan Valley. So we come down quite a distance, 105 kilometres from the exit of the Sea of Galilee as we get down to the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea, its surface is 394 metres below sea level, and it itself is 396 metres deep. So it's a very deep impression on the earth, isn't it? And the reason for that is it's actually part of what's called the Rift Valley, or the tectonic plates, I guess. The kids that would know that. That's actually a joint of one of the tectonic plates, and it follows down, continues down out the bottom of that and across into the region of Africa, which is a perfect place given that the scriptures speak about an earthquake at the return of Jesus Christ. And a movement of those plates is what causes an earthquake, isn't it? So let's just quickly go through those distances. So 19 kilometres from Mount Hermon down to Hula. From Hula, the Hula lake is about 6 kilometres itself. Then another distance of 18 kilometres. The Sea of Galilee, 21 kilometres from north to south. We've got that distance of about 105 between the exit from the Sea of Galilee to the entrance to the Dead Sea, and then about 80 kilometres from the north to the south of the Dead Sea. I will leave that picture there up for you. We'll finish there because I think we've done quite a bit for tonight, but there's a few points on there that you might just want to consolidate. What you can definitely get there, it's a cross-sectional view looking from the River Jordan back towards the Mediterranean Sea, and that's the sort of hill line that you see. Okay, so this is probably a really good one that I've had in my I'll put in my Bible in the bottom there. It gives you that feel of just how high Mount Hermon is at the top, at the northern part of the land of Israel, and how it steeply comes down, and then how the Judean hills look over the Jordan Valley as the Jordan continues to descend down to the Dead Sea. So hopefully that's been interesting for you and a good start for us just to start thinking about the topography of the land of Israel. I've got some books up here as well, as Uncle Malk said. This one particularly, obviously I can't put these things on for copyright reasons, but got some beautiful pictures in here if you want to come and have a bit more of a look at some of the areas after the talk tonight.
Thanks for that, Brother Phil. That's certainly a very good start for some useful information in our margins, so that's good. And if you've got any questions or need the PowerPoints, you know where to come. So that's very good. Right, so not a great deal of announcements other than our special study weekend is next weekend. Because of that, there will not be a B next Sunday evening, but the afternoon will be worth coming to because we're talking about storms and
the one after is another one.
that's right. So we've got one more, but that'll be a fortnight's time. And there are all the announcements.
If you want any of that Bible marking insert, come and see me directly afterwards. I'll trim one up.
Right, so that's probably enough announcements for one day. So we'll bring our evening to a close by singing hymn 405. Our God in highest heaven, we have considered this evening the land of promise, that land which is the centre of the world and the apple of thine eye, although despised by many of the nations around at present. But we look to the time when all nations will come to Jerusalem to worship and to learn of thee, when no longer will it be downtrodden and downcast, but it will be the praise of all the earth. And we seek, God, that in thy mercy we each may find a place in that time when we may walk its paths. So maybe encourage one another to follow thy commandments, so that we might be in there in that day. Until that time, we seek thy blessing on each of us. Guide us in the coming week. And if thy Son has not returned, that we meet together again around thy word to encourage one another until that time comes. We leave our lives in thy care and seek thy continued blessing through Jesus Christ, this earth's future King. Amen. If you weren't here this morning, there's a goodie basket in the back hall, and also your meal is in the freezer. So if you weren't here this morning and didn't get them, just make sure you get them before you go.